weapon that form against us shall not prevail. No man that rise against us, that war they shall never win. Because I will conquer, no, I will conquer. Yes, I will conquer them. Come on, let's conquer. No, I will conquer. Rise up and conquer them. Thank you, Father. I want to say thank you, Lord. You're everything, Father. Thank you. Father, you alone shall guide me. No man shall lead my path. In the wind I hear your quiet whispers, and you heal my broken heart. Even some of my friends turn enemies, and they pray for right to feel. And remember you gave us your only begotten son, but we gave him the wound of flesh. Send down your warriors with the hello, they carry down to the end of days. No matter how the devil tries trick me, unto you my soul I will give. Father, I know this time is coming. I can see the high tide raise. Without you there is no other. Could it be that we decide? No weapon that form against us shall not prevail. No man that rise against us, that war they shall never win. Because I will conquer, no, I will conquer. Yes, I will conquer them. Come on, let's conquer. No, I will conquer. Rise up and conquer them. I am a man. I am a champion. I am a warrior. So who are you to tell me that I cannot make? Who are you to tell me that I am not the greatest thing that God ever created?
Good morning, Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. You're listening to Hard Talk Grenada. A very special good morning to those of you joining us on the various radio stations: 97.5 CitysoundFM, 89.5 CRFM, 91.9 and 91.5 RealFM radio, and 92.9 Sister Ra radio broadcasting from Hillsborough, Carriacou, and of course 94.9 We Noise radio out there in Brooklyn, New York. A very special good morning to those of you joining us on the live video, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you may be. Good morning to you. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Wednesday morning. I had to be sure. In 2021. I remember this morning, it's 2021. And of course, we are, grateful to be alive and well. And with me in studio, I have none other than my co-host, Mr. Roland Bola. Good morning, Mr. Bola.
Good morning to you, Ms. Duncan. And you seem as though from your facial expression that you had a really good night and that your morning is going very well. Thank God for that. You're blessed. Yeah, I dare say that you look well. You oftentimes do, but this morning, there's just a little glow or special sparkle, and I dare not even suggest or ask the reason for that. Good morning to our listeners out there. Thank you for joining us on Hard Talk. It is a Wednesday. It is midweek. Sometimes some people talk about Wednesday. And it's the time to go back in time. You've just completed half of the week and you have another half to go. So you revive your spirit and yourself with something extraordinary on a Wednesday. Be that as it may, whatever you choose to do, we're happy to have you. We're glad that you can join us. We are happy that you are alive, that God has given you another opportunity to bask in the beauty of His wonderful day, His creation. Let's be grateful, let's be thankful, but let also share that joy and that beauty with each other. If we are in a good mood and having a good feeling, let's shout out to our neighbor and tell her today it's a wonderful day. It's another beautiful day in God's world, so that we should enjoy it. We should do good always, which is what I oftentimes say. Let's do good always, and when we can't do good, let's do nothing at all. Just shout out to all of our friends, our wonderful listeners, our ardent supporters, wherever you are, whichever part of the country, or whichever part in the region, or extra regionally, because we broadcast on Real Noise FM out there in Brooklyn, New York, and there are many people from other parts of the world who join and listens to and comments and take in what we say and what we do through the other various platforms. So it's a beautiful Wednesday, as we say. We hope you would enjoy it, and we hope you would enjoy the 2 hours with us on Hard Talk and be part of the process. You have an opportunity to send us a comment, to ask a question, to call. And if you don't feel like calling, or you don't have the time to call, and you want to put something out there on Facebook or somewhere, or on our own email, you can. We will read it once we get it, if it makes sense to us. So to do, or we'll give you a response if that's what you're expecting of us. But let us all be good today and leave it to the fullest.
Absolutely. And Mr. Bowler, we have a very interesting program this morning. We are going to yesterday there was a press conference by the Minister for Health and the new AG, which I must say is a very proud moment for women in Grenada, because she is the first female Attorney General that we've had, and of course proud because she's from my hometown, Mount Morris. So I feel very good about that. A lot of good things been coming from Mount Morris these days. We have the Commissioner of Police also coming from Mount Morris also. So I kind of raised my nose a little bit. I feel good. Mount Morris producing good things. Before they used to say guava alone that could produce good things, eh?
Maybe that's why you're smiling so this morning.
You feel? I'm fine.
Because your nose raised.
Probably.
So you smile and get a little broader.
Get a little broader. Yeah. I mean, I just got up this morning in a really good mood. And that happens when you choose to fill your day with positivity. You go to sleep in a good mood, you wake up in a good mood, and your day just continues to be good. And it's up to you to
because through the night you got good, so your day and your morning end up good.
Yes, I got very good sleep.
You went to sleep in a good mood. You wake up in a good mood because through the night you got
good sleep. Yes. Good sleep, so I feel refreshed and rejuvenated. And I'm ready to start my day. And what we're going to do this morning, at some point, we are going to play the press conference that happened yesterday with the Minister for Health and the Attorney General. And the purpose of that press conference really was to highlight a very specific topic, and that has to do with the new regulations, the new state of emergency, and so on. Some persons not understanding the entirety of what was happening started commenting, indicating that some illegalities had transpired. And she took time, and I thought she did a wonderful job in explaining exactly what happened, exactly how it happened, and exactly what is going to transpire after 21 days has elapsed. And I want us to take some time to replay that. And of course, we're going to come back after that and try to give a more condensed synopsis of what has transpired. And it's important for us to understand these things, because generally we tend to listen to people whose intention is to mislead us. So sometimes you may say, oh, well, it's a lawyer that tell me that, but is the lawyer's intention genuine? Or is the lawyer telling you with the hopes that you would go and spread the propaganda for him? Sometimes we have to understand what our role is in certain things. Sometimes our role is just to be the transmitter, whether we're transmitting good news or whether we're transmitting propaganda. Sometimes we have to understand what our role is. If for any reason a lawyer believes that what was done illegally, then it is in their legal rights to contest it. Why would a lawyer make you go on social media to contest something that they have the power to contest, that they have the knowledge and the know-how to speak about, to articulate, but they're giving you the information to go out there and say it? Don't you find that funny?
Well, It is funny in the way you explain it, but it is not funny when they are achieving the goal that they set out to.
Yep, yep, yep. And we always speak about intention. You always have to ask the question, what is your intention? What do you hope to achieve in doing what you are doing now? What do you hope to achieve in saying or telling, when you give me this information, what am I supposed to do with it? And what is it going to achieve when I do it? Is it going to be more effective if you do it? Mm-hmm. And if that is the case, why are you not doing it and why do I have to do it? And these are the questions that sometimes we have to ask people when they give us certain tasks and give us certain things to do. Because I don't understand why somebody with no legal knowledge is contesting the Attorney General's decision or legal knowledge on a particular issue, stating that they were told by legal minds behind closed doors. Well, if the legal mind's talking behind closed doors and they're sending you in the public to say that, well, you didn't find something wrong?
Well, there's something is wrong when you explain it, but a goal is being achieved by who wishes to achieve
said goal.
Yeah, but I think it's also important because of the timing of the press conference, which was yesterday afternoon, just about sometime after 4:30, timing there, when a lot of people may not have been at home or were not able to sit in front of their television and take in this thing properly. I think it's important that we play it or replay it. It's about an hour long, from what I understand. And so once you can cue it up, Ms. Duncan, I think we should let the listeners listen to what has to be said, or what was being said, not has to know, but was, because it has passed. And we can get into a discussion thereafter, and people can give their own views on what they have heard, and in some instances, probably what they have seen on social media, which is something I don't pay a lot of notice to.
Yeah, because they always say you have to be careful on social media.
Yes.
Social media is generally someone's opinion of a certain thing.
Yep.
So you have to be particularly careful when you are taking things from social media and bringing it in a public light, as if it were, common knowledge, or if it were information that is hard pressed that you could take to the bank. We have to be very careful.
Good pressed tobacco.
Good pressed tobacco. So we are going to take some time to do that. My system seems to be giving me a little trouble here, Mr. Bola.
Yeah.
You know how technology works these days.
Why would the system give trouble at this time of
I
morning?
don't know, I don't know if the system has something against me. I don't know.
You sure you're handling the system correctly?
I would like to believe so. I would like to believe so. But don't worry, there are ways to get around these things. But I just want to encourage the public, as we're just taking some time to resolve this issue. I want to encourage people to be mindful of the information that you listen to, the sources that you get that information from. And when we're playing the press conference, as much as possible, try to listen actively. We often say that active listening is important, that you listen actively to what is being said, because you don't want to end up in a situation where you still listen to all of that and you still get it wrong, right? So take your time and listen to what is happening. What we're going to do at this time is we are going to have to take, Mr. Bola, a very short break so that I can try and resolve this this technical issue, and then of course we can come back to the conversation of, was there any illegalities in the new state of emergency, and what you need to know to get you to understand what has happened in that instance. So guys, we're going to take a short break, and then we are going to be back with some more information for you. Stay tuned.
COVID-19 spreads from person to person through the COVID-19 spreads from person to person through the droplets that are produced when someone coughs or sneezes, which makes it easy to spread between people in close contact. Now let's get prepared to stay healthy.
To reduce your chance of catching or spreading COVID-19, practice these simple everyday preventative measures. Droplets can also land on surfaces, so ensure that you wash your hands frequently for a minimum of 20 seconds or sing the happy birthday song twice. Avoid touching your face, especially your eyes, nose, and mouth. If soap and water are not readily available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer with an alcohol content between 60 and 90%. 70% is ideal.
When you cough or sneeze, cover your nose and mouth with a flexed elbow or a tissue. Dispose of the tissue immediately and then wash your hands. If you notice someone has COVID-19 spreads from person to person through the droplets that are produced when someone coughs or sneezes, which makes it easy to spread between people in close contact. Now let's get prepared to stay healthy.
To reduce your chance of catching or spreading COVID-19, practice these simple everyday preventative measures. Droplets can also land on surfaces, so ensure that you wash your hands frequently for a minimum of 20 seconds or sing the happy birthday song twice. Avoid touching your face, especially your eyes, nose, and mouth.
Carefully to what is being said so that we can all discuss after the fact. All right, so we're going to take some time to do that at this point.
I'll hand you over to the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Leslie Ann, and good afternoon to you all of our viewers and listeners, members of the media out there. Thank you for accommodating us at this later hour. It was to ensure that both myself and the AG could be present to give you briefings. I'm going to go right into our briefing for COVID-19 with respect to cases. We do have one more case to announce today. Results came back late last night, and one individual, travel-related individual, is in quarantine and has minor symptoms of a headache and cough. Person traveled in from the US. will be kept in quarantine like all individuals until the person has been medically cleared. This brings our total number of active cases at present to 12. Of those 12 active cases, 10 are travel-related individuals who were picked up as being positive after arrival and while still in quarantine. The other 2 individuals are related to our December cluster, who still remain positive, but we hope and expect them to clear within the next 24 to 48 hour period based on the length of time that they have been in isolation, and also pending an additional COVID-19 PCR test on them. Our total positive cases to date are 139 at present. And let me repeat, 12 active cases at present. Of those 12 cases, 10 are travel related, 2 related to our December cluster. 1 new case to announce today, bringing that total that I just announced. Having said that, I think we do want to spend some time talking about the new regulations as we move forward. So I will pass you back to our host and look forward to hearing from the AG and answering any other questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Honourable Minister. So we hand you over now to the Attorney General, Ms. Dia Forrester. Good afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to update you in relation to the new regulations and proclamation. So what we have now present is the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Proclamation 2021, and that's SRO number 2 of 2021. And likewise, the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020, which is SRO number 3 itself. So in total, these are the main things that we wish to raise based on what has been done. Firstly, and I know there's a general concern in relation to whether or not there has been a declaration of emergency, because the last declaration of emergency was done on the 21st day of December 2020. Now, of course, in the normal scheme of things, a declaration of emergency, that proclamation that accompanies it lasts for 21 days, and that would have lapsed today's date. So what would have been done is that initial declaration of emergency was actually revoked, and a new declaration was done by the Governor General. So that was done yesterday on the 11th of January 2021, and of course it was properly gazetted, and all necessary steps that had to be taken for it to come into effect were in fact undertaken. Moreover, that state of emergency
remaining in quarantine isolation are told they are to book for a minimum of 7, and that the quarantine period actually is 14, and that we would endeavor to release them. As we are now saying, they'll be released on day 7 once they have a negative test.
Persons may be aware there is going to be a parliamentary sitting on Friday, and at that stage, the houses, at least the House of Parliament, will take necessary steps, and then the Senate would follow thereafter when the Senate sits, if those things are actually passed by resolution. In terms of the regulations itself, the main things in the regulations that have changed in comparison to what was present in the last set of regulations is the curfew period. The curfew period has been changed from 8 p.m. It now goes from 10 p.m. instead to 5 a.m. So previously our curfew period was 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. So now we are 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. daily. In terms of other significant changes within the regulations, we have for funerals and weddings and private gatherings. Okay, for funerals, weddings, and private gatherings, they are now up to 20 persons. And if you need to have anything beyond that number, then it's merely a matter of applying to the Chief Medical Officer and the Commissioner of Police for permission to get that additional permission for the extra numbers that you need itself. So other than those 2 things, the regulations are substantially, not substantially, they are indeed the same as was existing before. So I am not minded to go through what was already there, because persons are generally aware and familiar with them in full.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, so we are keeping it fairly short today. So we've heard from the Honorable Minister and the Attorney General, Ms. Dia Forrester. Are you ready with your questions?
Afternoon. I have questions.
Go ahead, Linda.
Right. My first question is to the Health Minister from the cluster. Today is the 12th of January. The cluster actually started around the 11th, 12th of December, so it's almost about a month. Is there medical challenges or some medical development with these two persons who from the cluster who is still in quarantine? Because most of the persons seems to have been cleared medically. So what is the reason that they're still there after a month? And to Ms. Forrester, I went back and looked at the other proclamations and I realized they all had dates. The proclamation issued yesterday, I see no date of start and end. Can you explain why it is written that way?
Linda, thank you for your question. And no, we are consistent as we have been in the past. There is to clear from COVID-19, there are two ways. One is negative PCR. In fact, it's supposed to be 2 negative PCR in a 24 or 48 hour period, or as WHO PAHO recommends, is passing. What we have done is relied on both. So in this instance, those individuals would have passed their 14-day since their first positive result, but we are still, out of an abundance of caution, waiting for negative PCR results from them before we clear them. Out of an abundance of caution, we are doing that, and it is the same policy we've had for individuals who test positive in quarantine or individuals who test positive from transmission from someone here in Grenada.
Okay, Linda, to answer your question in relation to the proclamation having a start and end date. Now, the proclamation actually has never had a start and end date. The proclamation lapses after 21 days. I think you want to ask if the curfew has a start and end date. So the curfew would have started on the 11th, of course, of January, and the curfew would lapse the same time as the proclamation would lapse. So the same way how the proclamation lasts 21 days, the curfew would likewise last for that period of time. But it is important for me to state that the regulations are under consistent review. So the curfew period, or even having the curfew, may change at any time. It may be shortened, it may be extended, or it may be removed altogether. Those decisions are really informed by what are the current state of affairs and if there is actually a need to have it based on the medical advice that is being received and the instructions that are given to, of course, our office in terms of what has to be in place or what has to be changed.
Thank you. GBN, good afternoon. You have another question, Linda?
I had a follow-up, please.
Okay.
And the follow-up had to do with to Minister Steele. Thank you, Ms. Forrester. Minister Steele, can you tell us if we have a new, we have any revised travel protocols? And if Sanders did announce that, I think sometime in February, they will be resuming accepting new guests. Can you tell us if there are any changes to that? That is going to be earlier or it is still into February?
Linda, with respect to travel protocols, we have taken into consideration the most recent release from the Center for Disease Control, which was in December, which says the CDC recommends that individuals get a pre-travel test between 1 and 3 days before travel, that individuals get a post-travel test between 3 and 5 days after travel, and that individuals remain in isolation for 7 days after travel. Now, what we have had up to yesterday was that individuals had to get, as CDC said in December, a travel pre-travel test of 1 to 3 days, 72 hours. We were testing individuals on day 4. The CDC announced and revised in December that persons should be tested between day 3 and day 5. So we have made a decision that we will test on day 5. We would go to the extremity of the CDC recommendation, and that the CDC now recommends that individuals remain in isolation after travel for 7 days. We previously had it persons being released between day 5 and day 6. We will now move to persons remaining in quarantine isolation at a state-approved facility for 7 days. So they will be tested on day 5, and regardless of whether they receive their negative test results before the 7th day, they will be requested to remain in quarantine until the 7th day after traveling into Grenada. So that is the adjustment that we are making on the revised recommendations from the CDC as of December. Also, with respect to travel or travel related, we have continued the direct commercial flight restrictions from the United Kingdom. So there is a restriction on direct commercial flights from the United Kingdom, and that goes until the end of January. However, individuals with a travel history from the United Kingdom can still come to Grenada from a third-party country once they meet the criteria of the 72-hour negative PCR test before arrival in Grenada, and also will have to go through the quarantine as I just described it.
That's it for now, Linda.
Clarity. There's some people that will now be tested on day 5, but is expected to remain in quarantine for at least 7 days.
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
All right. So it is not 5 plus 7, 12. It's
No,
7 days.
7 days.
All right. The other thing I saw out of Barbados recently that persons who would have gone beyond the 7 days, that the state is taking up the funding for remaining in the quarantine. Is that under consideration for Grenada? Because recently we would have had some people, there was one person said that I know personally up to 10 days, which came at an extra cost to them. Is that under consideration for Grenada?
Linda, I can't speak to Barbados, but I know we have told people to make a reservation for a minimum of 7 days, and that the quarantine period is actually 14. And that if medically cleared before that, they would be, and that we would test on day 4, and once they had a negative test result, and we received that negative test result, we would clear them. Over the December period, as Barbados is experiencing now, we found ourselves inundated with the number of tests we had to do related to the December cluster, as well as individuals traveling in, which, as for almost every country in the world, December over the Christmas New Year's period is one of the highest travel periods as well. So we had a sort of a double load on us, and we were delayed with releasing individuals, but we made sure up front that individuals are told they are to book for a minimum of 7, and that the quarantine period actually is 14, and that we would endeavor to release them. As we are now saying, they'll be released on day 7 once they have a negative test, and we have those results. If there are delays because of demands within the community of us getting those negative test results back, we would not be able to release people on day 7, and we would have to rely on the other form of quarantine mandate, which is, with or without a test, 14 days quarantine.
All right. GBN, good afternoon. GBN, are you hearing us? Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Jared Joseph, GBN News. Minister, what is the rationale for the state of emergency and the curfew? But that's my first question. And also, businesses that mainly operate at night time are most affected by this curfew. Will stimulus packages or support mechanisms be available for such entities and their workers? Citing that, these businesses would have to have been closed since or some of them might have been closed since before Christmas and would remain closed until just before independence. Will support or stimulus packages be provided for them, and would those stimulus packages include people within the entertainment industry? These people have been hit, adversely affected by the pandemic, the lockdown, the whole situation for 2020, and it's now come into 2021. So these people, musicians, artists, singers, there was no carnival, no Christmas. That means maybe thousands of dollars lost in revenue for these people and their livelihoods. Would some sort of support be given to such persons?
Okay, thank you for your question. With respect to the state of emergency and the curfew, one facilitates the other. So the state of emergency is there to facilitate the curfew. Now, the reality of the situation is that this week, today, compared to last week or last month or any time last year, the threat of COVID-19 is even greater than ever before. The death rates in other countries are even higher than ever before. Our neighboring countries like St. Vincent, like Barbados, are all going through the challenges. And what is recognized, and we are not alone in this and in our response to COVID-19, that what you have to do is to minimize activity as much as possible without strangling your economy completely, which is why we have said from the beginning that we cannot remain closed indefinitely. And it's not just the entertainers that are being affected at all. There are many, many others, and the government is very much aware that there are many other individuals. In the hotel sector as well, we have closure of hotels still. Some closed in December. Some have most recently been contemplating announcing closures. And we have some that haven't opened up since the initial closing of our borders in March. So there are many individuals that are affected, and we do identify with as much as possible, which is why at this point, at this week, when we saw the threat has not been removed, while I'm saying the threat is even greater, but the local epidemiological situation has improved with respect to that December cluster. So we have given an easement on the curfew. Instead of from 8 o'clock, the curfew moves to 10 p.m. Now, from a medical standpoint or epidemiologics, they will say that we shouldn't have any activities at all. We should all still remain at home, because anytime we go out, there is a risk of spreading or catching COVID-19. But we cannot exist like that. So we have to find that balance. This week, based on Grenada's epidemiological situation, the best balance we can find is to move that curfew to 10 p.m. to give some form of opportunity for those who are involved in the hospitality business, who are involved in the entertainment business, who are involved in bars and restaurants, etc. And for the rest of us, general public, even supermarkets, groceries, shopping, us to have time out and outside, outdoors as well, that can be extended to 10 p.m. It means that individuals who work from 8 to 4 don't have as much of a rush to get home as they would have if the curfew was at 8 p.m. So there's constant adjustment, and the adjustments are because of the local situation at any one time. If we were to have another cluster outbreak, then we would have to reconsider those hours. If we continue the way we are going and we see an extreme level of compliance, then I do hope and I look forward to us being able to consider another form of easement or so that would give more individuals an opportunity to get as close as possible to a life of normalcy or pre-COVID normalcy, and that's economic as well as social. But at this point in time, it is not possible to go further. We are very much aware that there are 2, possibly 3 new strains of COVID-19. And in each of those cases, they're extremely more contagious. The strain out of the UK, by all information that we've received, is 70% more contagious, which means that any of the breaches that we would have had before, where Grenadians were put at risk from somebody who was COVID-19 positive, the chance of other Grenadians being infected is almost 3 times higher. So almost 3 times more Grenadians would have been infected. So in other words, if it was one of these strains that affected us in December, and that's still undetermined, 3 times as many Grenadians would have been affected by it. That's basically what it means when I'm saying that the threat increases while the local epidemiological situation may be under control. The threat increases, and therefore, regrettably for us, we do have to continue with certain constraints.
That's it for you now, Jared, for the time. All right, so let's move on to...
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Nancy Maguire, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead.
I have a question following up from last week when we spoke about the process for vaccinating Grenadians. You said that you were stepping things up and you had further information. So I'm just wondering about that, whether it involves private sector institutions, community clinics, or whatever. And do we have the ability to test for these new, more contagious strains in Grenada? And 3, a question from a colleague about the gentleman in the Limes that was suffering from hoarding and what the situation is with him and the location and how you're handling it as the minister and the MP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. On the vaccine update, there is still not a vaccine on the way in terms of to be delivered to any of our CARICOM countries. I have, as recently as today, had discussions with counterpart ministers. The only WHO vaccine still approved is the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which needs to be transported and stored at minus 80 degrees. We do have now confirmed ability to store said vaccine here in Grenada, as opposed to last week. We are able to store that vaccine, should that be the vaccine that as a CARICOM or as an individual country or as OECS we decide to go with. We are also in communication with Moderna, which is another vaccine that has received approval in the US, and also with AstraZeneca, which is a vaccine that has received approval in the UK and other European countries with respect to Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. Those are the only 3 at this point in time, because those are the only 3 that have either received approval from WHO or are well on the way in the process of, so that it is safe and prudent for us to have discussions with these manufacturers, so that if and when there is that WHO PAHO approval, we are ready there to pull the order out and have it shipped once it is approved. There are still a significant amount of discussions to be had public discourse on vaccinations. I know that there are many people who have a certain level of anxiety with respect to this particular vaccine, which would have been many other people. Most of them would not have had or don't have that level of anxiety or so for all of the other vaccines, polio vaccine, rubella vaccine, mumps vaccine, all of the others that are implemented as part of our national policy here in Grenada. Even individuals who annually would take the flu vaccine or who would take hepatitis vaccine, etc. So we recognize that, and we know that this discussion has to be had, and we have started having that discussion in small circles, but a public discussion has to be had. I think what is lacking right now is more information on those vaccines that are possible sources or cures for the COVID-19. And the ministry will be providing additional information. Right now, what is out there on social media is a lot of negative and misinformation with respect to vaccines and vaccine with microchips and all sorts of things. There is a valid need to be concerned and to take the safest route possible with respect to any medication, and which is why Grenada has said from day one that we would not be using a vaccine unless it is approved by WHO and Pan American Health Organization. We have still not changed that. What we have recognized is that there are many national bodies, for instance the CDC, Public Health Canada, NHS of UK and European Centre for Disease Control, who are equally capable or a significant part of the WHO approval process. So when we see them approving certain vaccines, we begin the discussion and seeking more information on those vaccines because we believe it is well on the way to approval. But at this point in time, there isn't a vaccine on the way for us. There is still need for discussion. That I will recognize from individuals that there are concerns because this is something new, and anything new there is concern. I will publicly say that once the WHO has approved a vaccine, I would take that vaccine. I would, like the rest of you, have concerns about taking a vaccine that is not approved by WHO PAHO and hasn't gone through that process. But I hold hard and fast to the same principles I would have had before COVID-19, that vaccinations have cured many of the deadly diseases that would have plagued us. Vaccinations continue to cure many of the deadly diseases that plague us, and that once a vaccine goes through the proper procedures for approval, then it is safe in my mind and in the mind of most health authorities to be used. An update on the let me get your other questions. With respect to the contagious strain or any of the contagious strains, the only facility within Carriacou that I'm aware of that can test for the various strains is CARFA. CARFA has informed us that should any of us have the desire, need or concern to find out if any of our positive cases are any of those strains that we are concerned about, to send samples to them the same way we send samples almost weekly just to verify our testing process as well. We would. What they have asked, though, so that they do not get inundated, because it's a much more lengthy process to actually identify the strain as opposed to simply say COVID-19 positive or not, they have asked us not to send samples for the time being unless the individual has a travel history or has come directly from the UK. And simply not categorically saying from that or implying from that this strain doesn't exist other places, but that right now the facts are that 70 to 80% of the positive cases in the UK are this new strain, and therefore that is why they have made that criteria. The individual in the Limes who was needing of help to clean up, today I was personally there to see for myself that it is the house is completely cleared, the property is completely cleared. I want to thank all of those who volunteered to assist, truckers and other individuals, those in my constituency office as well, who came out to assist this individual in need to clear up the neighborhood that he was in. And the individual, what we are now looking at, working with social development and others in the community, is to see how we can make this individual as comfortable as possible in his new clean surroundings of his house, so that just from a humanitarian standpoint, that we are and continue to be our neighbors' keepers. But I can confirm that the property has been cleared up.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Nancy. Callistra, good afternoon. Callistra, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can the Minister of Health give me an update if there's any new information on the committee, that was put in place to investigate our first COVID-19 related death? And could the minister also speak on the conditions at the laboratory for the technicians and the workers who work there? During the cluster situation, for instance, they had to work a lot of extra hours, work through the holidays, work nights, I'm guessing. And it seems as if there are no proper humane facilities for them to rest when necessary. So could the minister speak on whether or not any plans are in place to improve the conditions at the lab for the technicians? And the Attorney General, can you explain to me where in Section 17, if there's anything in Section 17 that gives the Cabinet any authority to make laws and regulations? And can you let me know whether or not those proclamations, the start and ending of them, were gazetted?
Okay. Callistra, thank you. With respect to the committee update, and yes, I should have had that in my opening remarks. The committee has finished its work, and they are summing up and preparing their report. I spoke to them just before, the chairman, just before this press briefing, and he is just about finished. He wants to have the ability to circulate it among his committee members for comments first, and then send it to me for me to present to Cabinet for their information first and foremost. So I expect that by tomorrow. It has taken a bit longer than Friday when I had first said that I wanted the report, but I prefer for them to be precise rather than just simply on time. So I do expect it tomorrow from the committee. If they do need a couple more hours or another day, I would be willing to give them. But the primary goal here is to have this done as quickly as possible, but as efficiently and effectively as possible. With respect to conditions in the lab, let me say this, that I spent many a night there with the lab technicians over the Christmas holiday, Christmas Eve, New Year's, throughout till 2-3 o'clock in the morning with them personally, because they were being asked to provide yeoman's duty, and I figured as minister, if I am asking and expecting members of my team to perform said duty, that I should be willing to be there with them in the performing of that duty. So I was there at the lab till 2-3 o'clock in the morning. The lab is in the brand new phase 2 building. No, they're not beds and couches there. It is a lab. And normally, the lab technicians and lab personnel aren't expected to be working such long hours. So I think we all need to recognize that they did work those extra hours, including Christmas Day, some of them there, and Boxing Day. But I was there with them, and I can say that while it's not the most comfortable of situations there, no, but it is a professional lab. It meets all the standards of the labs, and I was there with them until they left the building on most nights. Just as tired, stayed on my feet with them. I'm not a lab technician, but I wanted to be there with them, and other members of my team were there as well. Dr. George Mitchell, for instance, was there, and members from the very travel desk who were there to give whether moral support, to get food when they needed to get food or so, to run whatever errands, but to be there with them. So I'm not asking and expecting the lab technicians to continue with these long hours. Again, we will make various adjustments to prevent that, additional shifts or so. As well as with respect to travel-related testing. We do need to contemplate and are contemplating the need to have private sector take up some of that burden for individuals now who will need PCR tests to go to the UK and to go to the US. That appropriate tests should be provided by the private sector and not necessarily by the general hospital or by SGU. So it's most definitely not inhumane conditions. I was there myself for the length of time that they were there. So thank you for the question.
Okay. So in relation to the question, you said if Section 17 makes provisions for Cabinet to make laws and regulations. Now, whilst you did not indicate which Section 17 of what law you were referencing, one assumes you're referring to Section 17 of the Constitution, because that is where the Governor General has powers to make a proclamation. And I think the Constitution, the provisions of the Constitution are very clear in indicating that it is the Governor General that does that, and all proclamations are indeed gazetted. In terms of any proclamation, there is no need to take a step to gazette the end of a proclamation, because they all have a specific time in which they lapse or they are to end in that process. Anything that doesn't lapse in its usual length of time, in this instance within the 21-day period, there is provision within it itself referencing that has been, anything that existed before has actually been repealed. So a review of each of the proclamations, you would be able to confirm the representations I have made, that if they have not lapsed, there is an indication that the prior declaration has been repealed itself. In terms of regulations and who deals with regulations, regulations are guided by the substantive legislation that relates to them. So for instance, in relation to the Public Health Act, regulations are signed off on by the minister, the relevant minister, as stated within the substantive act itself. So in terms of the Emergency Powers Act, that is again is signed off by the Secretary to the Cabinet as in accordance with the substantive act. So I hope that clarifies the question you have raised. And again, I assume Section 17, you meant Section 17 of the Constitution.
Thank you, Callistra. Beverly, good afternoon. Beverly, good afternoon. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Leslie.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, colleagues, Minister, and Madam AG. My first question is to the Minister. Minister, the Constitution allows for persons who have or are suspected of having contagious diseases to be isolated. So, because there is such a small number of people in Grenada, small number of active cases, why isn't the government putting those people in isolation and leave the rest of us free? Because really, why do we have a state of emergency for this small number of active cases when they can easily be isolated so that the rest of the country can enjoy some kind of normality without having to worry about a curfew or a state of emergency? Do we really need a state of emergency for that small number of people? That's the question, when they can easily be isolated and monitored. And for the AG, I wish to follow up on that question which Callistra asked, because I am not very clear with the answer she gave. Section 17 of the Constitution is where she referred, and the question was, where does it give the Cabinet authority to make rules for the company? Where does it give the Cabinet authority to make laws and rules for the country? So those are my two questions for now. Thanks.
Beverly, my response to your question is because the government recognizes that the systems in place are not perfect. You yourself have said that the law allows us to place those persons identified or suspected in isolation. The law doesn't say, because the law recognizes it's not possible for you to say that only those identified and suspected are those who could possibly get it. That there isn't somebody out there still not yet identified or infected by it, simply because the government hasn't found them. And as I've said earlier, the risk increases. I do not feel comfortable, I'm not sure if you do, to be able to say that I know where the next case is going to come from. And therefore, let us all drop our guards and go out and be merry, remove the state of emergency, remove the quarantine, and allow us to exhale. I would like to exhale just like any of us. as well. But at this point in time, the epidemic, not just in Grenada, but throughout the world still exists, that you will see the course of action that we are taking is very similar to the course of action that other countries are taking. I can use the example of Trinidad. Right now, I'm not sure if you're monitoring, but I am. The number of daily cases in Trinidad has significantly come down. Significantly to where they were. I think in the last week or two we would see at maximum 8 to 10 cases per day being found compared to where they were. So the same argument can be used there in terms of the question that you're posing, but the answer, I'm sure my colleague minister would give the same answer. We still need to be cautious until we are able to rid ourselves of a COVID-19 threat. We still need to take responsible steps to protect our citizens as best as possible while finding that balance between lives and livelihoods. So that is the best answer I can give you to that question. Thank you, Bev.
So in relation to the question of Section 17 of the Constitution, what I can indicate is that Section 17 of the Constitution makes provisions generally for how you declare that there is an emergency, and the provision itself provides that the Governor General may take certain steps. Likewise, the Houses of Parliament, after the Governor General has taken certain steps, may, by resolution, the Houses of Parliament may approve any declaration of emergency that the Governor General has made. So I hope I've now answered the question in full. Maybe you may need to clarify if there's anything further you'd like me to address in relation to the provisions of Section 17 itself, but Section 17 is very clear in stating that it is the Governor General and the Houses of Parliament that deals with declarations of a state of emergency.
Thank you. Bev, is that it for you? All right. MTV, good afternoon.
Okay, not quite, Leslie Ann, because the substantive question is still not answered.
Okay, which one is that?
Where does the Cabinet get its authority? The Cabinet is not the legislative arm of government, so where does it get its authority in a state of public emergency to make laws?
Okay, so I think you are trying to focus in relation to the regulations itself, right? As I stated previously, the regulations are guided by the substantive legislation that makes provisions for regulations to be passed. So in this instance, if we are looking at the Public Health Act, it would be the Minister of Health who has the responsibility to make regulations. In relation to the Emergency Powers Act, it is the Secretary to the Cabinet. So I hope that now clarifies or answers the very narrow question I think you're asking in relation to on what premise regulations are passed. It is governed by the substantive legislation that makes provisions for regulations to be undertaken.
And let me say, Cabinet hasn't passed any laws at all. Cabinet has implemented certain regulations within the narrow corridor that the relevant minister, in this instance myself, has the authority within the narrow corridor of the legislation, the laws. We can pass certain regulations.
MTV, good afternoon. Are you there? All right. They seem not to be there, but they were asking for an update on the Guelph Polyclinic.
Well, the Guelph Polyclinic progresses. That actually falls under now my colleague Minister Delma Thomas. So I have not been up there since before Christmas. But I know in the most recent update, the efforts to increase the services that would be offered there and to ensure that all of those said services were done in a timely manner would progress. I really cannot say whether there was any delay caused in that from the events over the month of December or not, but I can make sure and get some information from my colleague minister on it, hopefully even while we're here online if possible, and give you an update as to if there's any shift in the timelines. But what what we last said with respect to the services and the expected dates of delivery are still expected to be on target.
Okay, so just to come back in relation to some of the substantive legislation, in particular the Emergency Powers Act. When you look at Section 4 of the Emergency Powers Act, it states, during a period of emergency, the Cabinet may make regulations. So that confirms what I have been indicating, that the secretaries to the Cabinet, when regulations are being made pursuant to the Emergency Powers Act, that is who the Substantive Act provides is the one who must sign off on these regulations itself. So again, the important thing to note is that when you want to confirm who is able to pass regulations, you have to check the substantive legislation to confirm who is given that power within the Substantive Act itself.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any quick final question before we wrap things up?
Yes, Leslie, just at the final one.
Okay, go ahead quickly.
To the AG, the Act itself is supposed to draw reference from somewhere, because an Act can say anything. You can put anything you want to put in an Act, but it has to be based in some constitutional matter. It has to come from there, and it cannot seem to be in contravention to the Constitution. So while it's there in the Act also needs to tell you where it got permission to put that in the Act, or else it can be deemed to be against the Constitution.
So to address the follow-up question you were asking, of course, Parliament/the legislature is who is responsible for dealing with legislation that is passed. There's a presumption of constitutionality in relation to any laws that is passed in Grenada. So, for instance, when the Emergency Powers Act is passed, unless a court otherwise declares, it is presumed to be in accordance, to have been done in accordance with the Constitution. The same applies for all other substantive pieces of legislation. There is that presumption of that state of affairs.
All right, colleagues, thank you so much. We have to wrap things up here right now. So, AG, I'll give you the opportunity to say a few final words, and then we'll go to the Minister.
Okay, so in relation to the current regulations, I encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with the regulations so you know what are the things that you are required to do as a matter of law. Of course, you know the curfew time from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. in terms of social activities, whether it is at your private home or funerals or weddings. The maximum is supposed to be 20. If you need to have anything above or beyond that, you do need to seek permission from the Chief Medical Officer and the Commissioner of Police for you to do the same.
Thank you very much. Honorable Minister.
Just to say that I would like to again take this opportunity to thank all of those who provided yeoman service over the holiday period to get us to where we are now. Our frontline workers, our nursing team, the team at the lab, our RGPF officers as well, Ministry of Health personnel in general, the doctors and nurses that have been providing yeoman service as well at the General Hospital and at Princess Alice and Princess Royal Hospital. We are not out of the woods as yet. They have, and us collectively as a nation, have accomplished quite a lot between the last half of December and to date in 2021 in getting back as best as possible control on our local epidemiological situation. But COVID-19 is not defeated as yet, and I do not expect this virus simply to take all the blows that we've been giving it and just walk away. It's going to keep trying to come back and come back again until we have that vaccine rollout that we can protect us all, similar to when polio kept rearing its head, when measles kept rearing its head. The solution to this virus, like any and all viruses, is a vaccine cure for it. Between now and then, we're seeing situations worldwide, including in countries that have begun that rollout of vaccine, things getting worse. because of the time it takes to roll out the vaccines for themselves, and the fact that there have been new strains identified of the vaccine. You would remember in the past it was individuals who were coming from the US and UK had to go through, Grenadians themselves coming home had to go through this extreme requirement on our part that they had to be tested before they traveled to Grenada, that they had to get a test within 3 days of travel in order to come to Grenada. And we took that extra level of caution because we recognize how fragile our nation's health and health systems are. I would be the first to say as minister, we are a developing country and we have had and continue to have a very fragile health system. So we had to take those additional precautions. But we are seeing those very same first world nations now taking the same precautions, because no matter how strong their health systems were and are in comparison to ours, they're becoming fragile now because of the extent of this virus. So regrettably, individuals going to the UK now are going to need that same 3-day test requirement, and announcements have been made by the United States as well that they need that as well to go to the United States, and announcements have been made by Canada as well that they need that to go to Canada. I don't say that to gloat at all. I say that with deep regret that the situation continues to get worse and worse in the world. But I say that to say that the science in Grenada is the science in Canada, in the US, in the UK, and in the world. And the measures that we have taken, the only variations you will find is based on, from us to any other government that is following the science, is the level of caution or the degree of caution that we take based on what the science tells us. The epidemiological situation necessitates at any point in time. So it is with deep regret that we have some of our other neighboring countries going through similar situations, and we hold them in our thoughts and prayers in the same way that we assume that they have held us in their thoughts and prayers. And we look forward to all of us getting past this, getting rid of COVID-19 and putting this behind us with the rollout that we're seeing happening now elsewhere with an approved vaccination.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister and Madam AG. Colleagues, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. For all of you who joined us via Channel 22, the Facebook and YouTube pages, and of course those of you in the diaspora and our colleagues on Zoom, thank you so much. Here's where we end the broadcast for today. Have a blessed evening, everybody. Thank you.
All right, guys, and there you have it. That was a repeat broadcast of the post-cabinet briefing yesterday, where there was a lot of information derived from that one briefing. I am hoping that there are people who received information that clarified some of the things that they were thinking. As it relates to the regulations and as it relates to the state of emergency. A few people on social media were a bit baffled. And of course, the propaganda machines of opposition forces took very full advantage of that, as they continue to do, Mr. Bola, as they continue to do on a regular basis, just taking advantage of the fact that some people just don't know, or they just don't understand some of the things that are happening. And before we have an opportunity, or government has an opportunity to sit and really take it apart and explain it to the general public, they rush in front and put all of these miscommunications out there. So, as the AG very well spoke, and again, every time I hear her speak, I'm a little bit more proud of the strides that we are making as women, you know. But as she made very clear, and I'm going to see if I can condense it, because Mr. Bola, you have more institutional knowledge, but I try to use a little bit of common sense to try and dilute it, you know, for those of us down here who don't understand fully. As she stated, the Constitution gives right to the Governor General to make proclamations regulations in terms of states of emergency and so on. And those proclamations last for 21 days. And of course, in this case, this is what has happened. But of course, it also gives right, or the act itself gives right to the minister and the cabinet secretary to make those regulations and sign off on those regulations that include our curfews and so on. Now, as she said, the proclamation itself can last for 21 days, but the curfews, the protocols within it, the regulations within it, such as if we are on curfew at all, if we go on a total lockdown, whatever it is, those regulations within that proclamation can change or cease to exist. But the state of emergency, that state of emergency proclamation would last for 21 days. Did I get it right, or did I miss anything?
Well, I think you did in terms of trying to make it as easily understood as possible, because it is only the Governor General can declare a state of emergency based on what I know. The Prime Minister can advise based on what is happening, based on information that reaches him, but he must go through the Governor General to get the proclamation done and signed off.
Or basically just to say she must proclaim a state of emergency.
Yes.
Just in case people don't understand what the whole proclamation is all about. Right. She must be the one to proclaim that we are in a state of emergency.
Well, let's just say, in our case it's a she now, but let's just say the Governor General is the one, because if the she changes then and becomes a he, the person holding the position of Governor General at any particular time is the person who has that authority, that power based on the Constitution to proclaim a state of emergency.
Right.
And there was a lot of questions surrounding Cabinet's authority to make rules. Cabinet don't generally make rules. Cabinet follows the dictates of any particular piece of legislation, as was explained under the Emergency Powers Act and what have you. It dictates what the minister, because oftentimes it says the minister, and what does the minister mean? It has been explained several times, means minister in cabinet.
Right.
Yes? So while it says the minister must not and cannot just sit on his own in his own little office and decide this is the regulation, I will do that regulation. He or she, as a minister, may come up with some sort of regulations that they think is necessary for a particular time under a particular bit of legislation. But that is generally discussed at the cabinet level and get inputs from other members of cabinet, how to fashion it, what it should happen. So let's take, for example, as we have it now, the state of emergency, the curfew, right? Minister of Health may probably feel curfew could go from 9 to 6. Just using that as an example. But in discussion with his colleagues at the cabinet level, they arrive and there is what is called collective agreement that it should be from 10 to 5. And rationale will be given from both sides. Because that's why cabinet meets. Cabinet is the collective body of all the ministers, bringing the strengths and sometimes the weaknesses together to discuss any particular issue that will affect the country. Hence the reason cabinet meets at least once per week, but can meet many times per week or per day if need be. If something happens, so yes, Monday, would be the normal day, the regular day in which the cabinet meets. But should there be something that comes up, cabinet can be called to come in and sit at any point in time for an hour, for 5 hours, for 2 hours, twice per week, 3 times per week, as need be. Because that is where you take the everyday happenings. So it could be something in health, it could be something in infrastructure, it could be something in national security. It could be something in education. So while there is a minister responsible for that particular ministry, the cabinet brings its collective thoughts and energies, strengths and weaknesses to bear on the issue, because the issue is one that affects a lot of people in the country, or if it's an issue that can have far-reaching implications, cabinet need to have a discourse on it.
Right.
And sometimes it is of a nature that it cannot wait until the following week, so the cabinet can just call a meeting, and the ministers come forward and they talk. So that is where. So the Constitution doesn't say, as the Attorney General explained, that ministers make laws, but the laws themselves, when passed in Parliament, some of them, not all of them, because there are some legislation that goes to Parliament that has no regulations that go with it.
Right.
But in cases where there needs to be regulation, it says the minister from time to time may make regulations to govern whatever portion of the law, right? And that regulation will go on and happen in the cabinet, because it is important that others bring their thoughts to bear.
Right. So the regulation in itself is what is allotted to the minister, and of course the cabinet secretary must sign off on it. But the minister for example, we have the Public Health Act, which is the act itself, and within that act it gives permissions to the minister.
That's where the authority comes from
to make those regulations.
Yes.
Okay.
So because the Public Health Act speaks to a number of different ailments.
Right.
Right? It's public health, whatever it is. We don't have them again, measles, polio. Now we have...
because we've been vaccinated, of course.
Right. Now we have COVID, and it was amended recently to include COVID specific. So it is there. It is now in the law. So whatever is happening as an issue in public health, and I think someone is trying to get our attention with a call.
Oh yes, and it's on the overseas line. So let's just take that. Yes. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Duncan.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I am
fine. I miss you
fine.
so much that I have to give you a special good morning.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bowler, good morning to you too, but don't jealous. You have no right to jealous.
You should see his face.
But what makes you think that I'm jealous? Don't always let women lead you. In fact, there's a very popular, once very popular Calypsonian in Grenada who said, don't put your mouth in woman business. Women have a way of putting men apart. I mean, that's why God made them anyway. Men should not be together. So they were made to keep men apart. But in this case, they want to break the friendship that exists between you and I. So be careful.
I hope you're not referring to me. I hope he's not
that nice statement would not convince me otherwise. So you have to try harder.
But I was trying to convince you of anything, sir.
Anyhow, I'm looking at a document in front of me, and I think that we have a constitutional problem. I just actually paid attention to it. It's called the Constitution. Okay, I'm not sure if you are aware of it, Ms. Duncan, but I'm looking under the section. It's chapter 2. And it speaks about the Governor General, okay? And all the wording there speaks to us that basically the Governor General, we cannot have at this point a female person sitting in the seat of a Governor General. And I'm telling you, and I'm actually reading it here. That's in chapter 2, and if you have the document, you can pull it up.
I can try.
And yes, and if we look at, because that means that all of the laws and stuff, and even the proclamation of emergency, the declaration of emergency given by Ms. Lagrenade is illegal. It's none and void, and that's a serious thing. And yes, chapter 2 speaks about the Governor General. And it starts with from 19, but if we read carefully, well, this whole thing, if we go down to chapter 2, 21 actually speaks about the period of the Governor General. You have chapter 2, 21, but actually you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. But let's go, if we go down to 22:1, and if we pay attention to it says, yes, it speaks about the Governor General has on occasion being absent from the seat of Governor General of Grenada. B says, has occasion to be absent from Grenada for a period in which he considered acting in his own deliberate judgment will be for a short duration or is suffering from an illness in which he, that's masculine, considered acting in his own deliberate judgment would be for a short duration, he may, that's Governor General,
I think I get your point.
In acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's written, it seems as though it is in the masculine form. But
that's what it is. It's actually in the masculine.
Okay. But we have to go back, way back, even into biblical days. And
thank you. Yes.
When it talks about
if we look, Mr. Bola, at how kings operated, a king would never send. You never had like a female person being sent to be a governor or a mayor of a king. It always was a masculine person.
Yeah, but you had queens.
And that, no, it's sent out. You had queens, but you're sent out to. A king always sent out his representative, or her representative was always a male.
But I don't know. We need to get legal mind. I don't think from what I hear you, and we pull it up here, but I don't think that debars a female person
from the position.
The position.
It does, except we have a constitutional reform. That also needs to be. You see, the constitutional reform has to be taken up again, and it has to be added in the reform.
Okay,
because
let me just pause you. Let me just pause you for a moment, right? In the same act the same constitution that you are reading, right?
Okay, that's chapter 2.
Right. At number 20, it says a person appointed to hold the office of Governor General shall before entering upon the duties of the office take or subscribe an oath. It does not, I would feel like if it's speaking about a man, it would be specific and say if he. It also goes on to say any such person. I mean, it doesn't give specifics to what the gender of a Governor General should be.
So that is a bit higher up from where you read.
And it also says...
Yes, and that is...
It also says... acting on the advice or in accordance of the Prime Minister, appoint any person. Let's see here. It doesn't. I don't see that as a real issue. And I mean, if that had been a breach of constitution, there were many legal minds that would have taken that to task. We have a lot of constitutional lawyers, such as Mr. Francis Alexis himself, who would have seen that as Dr. Francis Alexis himself, who would have taken something like that to task. I don't really think that is such an issue.
It is, it is, and Dr. Francis, well, I mean, not because someone is quote-unquote a legal mind means that they would there are certain things that they would actually miss, because if you pay attention also to the deputy, just lower down, the deputy governor general, that person to be appointed must also be a male, because it speaks of the person in the masculine gender. Even though, remember, even though you have, and even when you write in law, I mean, I'm not a legal professional. You might have, like, for example, in one section, it has like a general thing, but then you have an explanation in different, what you may call it, different clause. A different clause under that general thing would explain to you what this first general clause mean, and in that context, we should understand
I think
our
it's
Constitution.
fair. I think it's fair to say that none of us are legal minds, and that we are going to read and interpret based on our limited ability. I think that's
our
fair.
limited legal ability.
And I think that is fair enough to say. So maybe we should get a legal mind to further explain that to us, because even though I'm reading it, I'm seeing he. It doesn't mean that there isn't some provision elsewhere, or it doesn't mean that there isn't some provision at all that makes he in that context a male and female gender in context of the law. We don't know, because we are not legal luminaries.
If I hear you, my friend, but also I think on page 64, 65, it says quite clearly that if a law shall be created that shall be in contravention with this Constitution, the law shall be deemed null and void.
Right, but we don't know if it is in.
Yes, because you cannot make a law that is unconstitutional. Something that goes contrary to what the Constitution dictates.
Exactly.
Because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Right. And we are only assuming, or you are only assuming based on...
I understand what you're saying about bringing in a legal... And I would like to also challenge them with the Constitution. I would also like to challenge them with that particular part of the Constitution, because it's saying it would be also, just by the way, disrespectful for any one of us, me or Mr. Bola, to call you sir, to say good morning, sir, or refer you to you as an individual, as a man. It would totally be embarrassing. So
sometimes the way she has dressed, I just think she's male, you know.
You think?
So I mean, you can't. It's what I interpret from what I see.
Interpret from what you see, absolutely. but it is something that I think a legal mind should weigh in on and provide further clarity, because you and I can go back and forth on what we think it is, but with our limited legal information and knowledge, we are only assuming based on what we see in front of us.
Yes, and I want to before I go, I know other people have to call, but before I go, I want to Miss Bola, not Miss Bola, why are you giving your wrong name? Miss Duncan.
Miss Duncan.
I'm giving you wrong name.
Yes.
I don't want
and the wrongest of names too.
You doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
You want my wife give me divorce letter, but don't worry, she know better than that.
I just want to make a quick observation to a statement that you raised the other day, and I think that you have been in error as it relates to the vaccination, because I'm saying to you this: if, for example, you give your child the vaccination for, let's say, the COVID vaccination, as the topic was, and somebody else comes in or intermingle with your child that has COVID, your child not supposed to get COVID.
Well, that is actually incorrect.
So then we have to blame the vaccination and not the individual.
No, that's incorrect, because studies have shown that the vaccination is not really meant to prevent you from getting the actual virus. It is meant to provide antibodies to help you fight the virus so that you don't get so many adverse effects of it. That is what it is meant to do. And most vaccines do that, because there are people who have been vaccinated from chickenpox that have gotten chickenpox. They just haven't gotten all of the adverse effects that come with it. I hope I was clear enough.
I'll call you, but if you can bring, if you can bring something, if you can bring, get, especially Mr. Francis Alexis, and it's either two things. is either he change the wording of the Constitution and make his Constitution, or we have to abide by that, because I believe the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, or of any land, and that's what it says. And if we look, we see a lot of he and him and stuff like that, which in the time that it was written to, it cannot be a feminine person that
they're making reference.
Her Majesty was speaking to, making reference to.
Okay.
Based on the time period when it was written. So as a lady, don't feel bad, but it's just the Constitution. It's just a wording.
Okay. Well, we'll take that up as an issue, as you have brought it out, and we'll try to get some legal views on it. And of course, if you are correct, it cannot just be changed like that, because I think the very Constitution says what needs to happen for any change to be made, even just to move one word.
Yeah.
You have to go to a referendum.
We all know our history with referendums.
But, it is what it is, and we'll look into it.
All right.
Thank you for your observation, though.
We don't have much time, Mr. Vola, left because, of course, we wanted to make sure that the first half of the program was dedicated to clarifying that very important issue of who believes, or people who were misguided into thinking that the cabinet passed some law, or the cabinet is who was responsible for issuing the state of emergency. The state of emergency was a proclamation that was laid by the Governor General under the advice of the Prime Minister. And of course, the Prime Minister can advise and say, well, we believe that we have a state of we need to go into a state of emergency, and the Governor General has the right to ask, well, why? And he must provide valid reasoning
the rationale
as to why we must do it. And she, even in her wisdom, might say, well, I don't think that this is suffice.
You don't know what she would say.
I'm just saying
let's not even
that
go
it's
there.
a possibility.
Let's not even go there.
But she must be the one to make the proclamation, the regulations that lie within that proclamation. That would be the regulations for the curfew, whether we the quarantine, the times for the curfew, whether we go on lockdown or not, public gathering, the amount of people that are left to gather, and so on. Those regulations are left to the decision of the minister under the advice of the cabinet as well, because he must meet with his colleagues and they must all collectively agree.
Well, wherever the word minister appears in a piece of legislation, its reference is minister in cabinet.
In cabinet.
Right? So, while Minister Steele is the minister with responsibility for health, what if some regulation has to be made while he's out of state, while he's out on official government business, as ministers do from time to time? Whoever is acting will be the person taking it to cabinet. So minister refers to the minister in cabinet, whoever it is at whatever time, and not the person or the name of a person.
That is correct.
Right? So that we have to understand. And ministerial positions change from time to time as well. So it really means the minister in cabinet to make those regulations agreed on by cabinet colleagues after in-depth discussion, and then it is brought forward.
Right. And very quickly before we end, I want us to just touch on the need for a state of emergency. And some people are misguided by the fact that a state of emergency means that there must be a quarantine or there must be a curfew. A state of emergency, basically the proclamation, provides an environment for these regulations to be made in the event that they become necessary. So for example, we are in a state of emergency now, but there doesn't have to be a curfew. The curfew can be put on or taken off at any time because it falls within the regulations. Now, these regulations can change. The amount of people that are allowed to gather, whether we go out into the public or not, the time frame and so on for the quarantine, all of that can change within the regulations. The state of emergency just provides the foundation, the basis.
Well, it sets the stage.
It sets the stage.
So that those things can happen.
Now, people are asking, well, why do we need a state of emergency? Because if we look around us...
Because if you don't have a state of emergency, just simply answered, if that is not declared, if a state of emergency is not declared, the regulations that are made for curfew and what have you will be null and void.
Right. And then people might say, okay, well, we don't have any cases or we have limited cases, then why do we even need a curfew? Why do we even need a regulation? Now, what I was going to say is that if we look around us, Mr. Bola, things are increasing around us. Trinidad, Barbados, St. Vincent, even in the wider world, the US, the UK, things are increasing in those areas. Now, we cannot say just close the borders and let's just stay in Grenada and let everything fall apart around us, but we'll stay in Grenada. That cannot happen because we cannot completely shut all of our ports. We have things coming in on our...
But we are just not able to survive as a nation without having interaction with the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Our very livelihood, our very existence as Grenadians is highly dependent on our trade and interaction with other parts of the world. Now, we have to understand that it is very, to use for want of a better word, dangerous. We are living in very dangerous times, and the way in which we did business and we interacted have changed significantly. As is commonly said, there's a new normal that exists now.
Right.
So we have to put the necessary protocols in place. But we have to continue. So for those who say lockdown, don't let anyone come in, don't let anyone go, they are not thinking.
It's selfish thought.
Right. It's just a selfish thought. And it's almost like no thought. Because if you look at how countries operate, how things move, how the wheels of the economy rolls, you would recognize that to say lock everyone else out, lock the world off, close all your borders, no interaction, is not going to be possible for any length of time.
Absolutely.
You may do it for a week, for 2 weeks, probably a month, up to that, but you have to. Why do you think that the US and all those places kept open even when they had millions of cases? Because they have to. That is how they survive. They need to trade with China and with so many other countries around the world with the small. So we too have to understand that. However, we must take the necessary precautions to ensure in as much as possible that we keep our people protected. And for those who come in or who contract it, that we have the ability to take care of them and to deal with them. So the need for curfew and all those things is in keeping with trying to let life continue for us, livelihoods continue, but at the same time taking all the necessary precautions. So, sometimes when you have people all day just laboring about, give us with freedom, let we think, fine, you can say that. But when you are tasked with the responsibility to lead and to make sure, because these same people will be forced to go back on social media when things get out of hand, to say that the government did not do what they had to do, and the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister and the ministers and whoever else they could blame, the Chief Medical Officer, the police, whoever, if they did what they had to do, if they did this, did that, did the other, we weren't going to have so many cases now. We know, and we've said it before, they are just those who will find a problem for every solution. They complain about everything because what they want to achieve, this is the means by which they will achieve it. And most of them who do it, what they want to achieve is a change in the politics of this country. They want political supremacy. They want to be in the place of the NNP. So they'll do anything. And so we just urge people. We're not telling you which side to take, which side to like, but be careful with what you listen to, what you repeat, and how you do it. Let good sense prevail. Let your intellect be the one that will guide you, and listen to people who understand and has the facts in hand. I mean, what we're doing here in Grenada is what mighty England is doing now. What the US is doing now. Getting people to get tests 3 days before they arrive in the island. We've been doing that for months. And these are the things that has kept us the way we are. Not that we were totally protected from COVID because we had cases. But we have not had a situation where COVID got such a tight grip on us that everyone had to run for fear. We have been in control, we have been taking it in stride, and thank God for these regulations, these laws, these moves in a timely basis for the leadership that we have, the government and its people, Dr. Mitchell, the Minister of Health, and all the other ministers, understanding, listening to the science, and doing things on a timely basis, taking the necessary decisions so we can keep our people a bit safe, a bit protected. We would have hoped that we'd never have a death, that we'd never have a case, but we have to deal with it when it occurs. So there's so much more that we want to say about that issue, and it was so good listening to the minister and of course our new Attorney General, and I wish her the very best, and I hope that our nation will be the better off. We're having someone of her stature, young, but someone who I believe has a long way to go in terms of helping us to understand better what is happening from a legal standpoint. But we'll have to cut because we've come to the time when we must stop the program today, shortened version because we wanted to take on that press conference which happened yesterday afternoon. And so I want to wish all of you the very best with the shortened version. There may have been some of you who wanted to call but couldn't get through, but you've sent your comments, and so we thank you. We thank you for participating. Tomorrow, God's willing, should we survive and be able to come back here, we'll have a much longer program when we talk on a different issue, slightly different to what we're talking about today. Be your best, take good care, follow the protocols, and let not people tell you that there is no COVID in Grenada, so there is no need for the protective measures that we are having. Have a good day now, everyone.
All right, guys, we've come to the end of our program, and as we say here every day, in whatever you say and whatever you do, be safe and be secure. We always want to be talking with you, but we don't ever want to be talking about you. Please do enjoy the remainder of your day and stay tuned for the national report. Have a wonderful day, guys.
You're listening to Hard Talk.
Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new national party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp.
Government requests deferral of 4% salary increase for public officers for 2021. We'll have details to this story and more in the national report. With the details to the news for Tuesday, January 12th, 2021, I am Rikisha St. Louis. The government of Grenada is requesting deferral of payment of the 4% salary increase for public officers for 2021, which amounts to $13.2 million. In a statement issued on Tuesday, government said, while the increases were agreed upon in good faith, it is asking trade unions and staff associations that consideration be given to deferring any significant increase in recurrent expenditure given the uncertainty of the economic climate as a result of COVID-19. Government has had to bear the brunt of the impact of COVID-19 and took immediate emergency policy action to provide support to households and businesses, which involved significant unplanned expenditure. At the same time, government continued to protect its workforce from the loss of jobs and wage cuts while providing bailouts for others. Wages and salaries for all public officers have also been paid in full and on time every month.
The reality of the situation is that government must actually find $13.2 million to fund the increase in recurrent personnel expenditure. The 4% salary increase is a permanent addition to government's wage bill. Unlike the repurchase of the WIB shares in Grenada, which was a one-off expenditure on a revenue-generating capital asset. To equate the two is ill-informed and willfully misleading. Further, the funds used for the Grenada repurchase came from grants and soft loans, which were intended for capital development projects in the 2020 budget, and any deviation can jeopardize Grenada's future ability for such funding.
Head of the government negotiating team, Honorable Oliver Joseph. He says it is not in the government's interest to defer the 4%, since that will mean the return of a retroactive salary payment and 8% compounded interest payable in January 2022. But he says in its discretion, government deems it a reasonable ask to defer salary increases for 2021.
It is important to say here that government is in no way attempting to shirk its legal obligation. In fact, the government of Grenada accepts that we will have to pay the increase. However, what we are saying is that we are not able to afford payment in 2021, and based on the ongoing economic uncertainty due to the pandemic, we cannot project when government will be able to pay same. However, we hope the economy will recover sooner rather than later. Government reassures the nation of its commitment to secure the jobs of all its employees. Government has a responsibility to make the payment, and we also have a responsibility to manage the country's financial resources in the best interests of the nation. Government therefore kindly requests the understanding and acceptance of bargaining agents to defer the payment of the 4% salary wage increases for the year 2021.
An addition of one confirmed COVID-19 case has been recorded in Grenada. The individual exhibiting minor symptoms arrived on island from the United States and is currently in quarantine. This brings the total amount of active cases to 12, 10 being travel-related, while 2 are related to the cluster of cases in December 2020. Minister for Health and Social Security, Honorable Nicholas Steele, disclosed the information during the government's weekly post-cabinet press briefing on Tuesday. He explained that individuals must be medically cleared to ensure safety for all.
There is to clear from COVID-19. There are 2 ways. One is negative PCR. In fact, it's supposed to be 2 negative PCR in a 24 or 48-hour period, or as WHO PAHO recommends, 14 days passing. What we have done is relied on both. So in this instance, those individuals would have passed their 14-day since their first positive result, but we are still, out of an abundance of caution, waiting for negative PCR results from them before we clear them. Out of an abundance of caution, we are doing that, and it is the same policy we've had for individuals who test positive in quarantine or individuals who test positive from transmission from someone here in Grenada.
Grenada has recorded a total of 139 positive cases. Continuing the news, newly appointed Attorney General Dia Forrester says the new Emergency Powers COVID-19 Proclamation 2021, which was announced on Monday, January 11th, is legal, as it was done within the ambit of the law by the Governor General, Her Excellency Dame Cecile Lagranade, and gazetted. The new proclamation will last for 21 days, which will bring it to February 2nd, 2021. Her statement follows concerns raised on social media that the proclamation was done by the cabinet and is not legitimate. The Attorney General explained that the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Proclamation 2021 went through all the legal procedures before it was announced.
In the normal scheme of things, a declaration of emergency, that proclamation that accompanies it lasts for 21 days, and that would have lapsed today's date. So what would have been done is that initial declaration of emergency was actually revoked, and a new declaration was done by the Governor General. So that was done yesterday on the 11th of January 2021, and of course it was properly gazetted, and all necessary steps that had to be taken for it to come into effect were in fact undertaken. Moreover, that state of emergency, that proclamation is going to last for 21 days, so it runs until the 2nd of February 2021, and that will apply unless the Houses of Parliament fail to pass a resolution during that period, either to adopt the proclamation that has been made by the Governor General.
Adjustments were also made to the Emergency Powers COVID-19 Regulations 2020. The daily curfew was extended from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. The Attorney General calls on Grenadians to become more familiar with the COVID-19 regulations to avoid conflict with the authorities.
For funerals, weddings, and private gatherings, they are now up to 20 persons, and if you need to have anything beyond that number, then it's merely a matter of applying to the Chief Medical Officer and the Commissioner of Police for permission to get that additional permission for the extra numbers that you need itself. So I encourage everyone to familiarize yourself with the regulations so you know what are the things that you are required to do as a matter of law. Of course, you know the curfew time from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. in terms of social activities, whether it is at your private home or funerals or weddings.
This is the National Report. The news will continue after the break.
Protect yourself and our community from COVID-19. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. If soap and water are not available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer with at least 70% alcohol. Use a tissue when blowing your nose, sneezing, or coughing. Immediately discard the tissue properly and wash or sanitize your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Let's do our part to ensure that each and every Grenadian remains healthy. To stay up to date, visit the Government of Grenada's webpage or the Ministry of Health's Facebook page. For more information, contact the Ministry of Health's hotline by calling 53-VIRUS. This has been a public service announcement brought to you by the Ministry of Health.
Welcome back. Prime Minister Dr. the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell on Tuesday attended the 13th Special Emergency Meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community. Other members of Grenada's delegation included Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business and Carriacou Affairs, Honorable Oliver Joseph, Permanent Secretary in that ministry, Mrs. Roxy McLeish Hutchinson, Grenada's Ambassador to Carriacou, Ali Gill, and Grenada's Ambassador to the OACS, Kathisha Williams. The meeting discussed, among other things, access to COVID-19 vaccines for Carriacou member states. A statement on this is expected from Carriacou. Another topic of discussion was the border dispute between Guyana and Venezuela. In a statement issued Tuesday afternoon, Carriacou expressed deep disappointment and concern with recent statements by Venezuela and voiced full support of the judicial process underway at the International Court of Justice, which is intended to bring a peaceful and definitive end to the long-standing controversy between the two countries. The statement also reiterated Carriacou's firm and unwavering support for the maintenance and preservation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Guyana. Finally, in the news, Minister for Education Honorable Emmeline Pear says the government will continue to address the issue of internet connectivity as the ministry distributes devices to students and the teachers at various institutions. Before the 2020 lockdown, the ministry partnered with the Caribbean Regional Communications Infrastructure Program, CASIP, and service providers to install high-speed internet in schools across the island. Minister Pear says her ministry has been thinking way ahead and has laid the foundation to provide students with the significant resources for learning.
We have that in place, which is beautiful if there's no lockdown. So as a child, you go to school, you don't have internet at home. Of course, you can download everything that you need to use at home. You can download it. But another thing that is also beautiful is that when we went into ebooks, we ensured that those books did not require internet, that the child didn't need internet at home to use them. But then what if I want to go onto YouTube to look at a video that is educational? Or what if I need to go to a site that I need internet. So I need to Google, for example. Now that remains a challenge for us. And so what are we going to be doing? One, we actually did work with our service providers and of course the kind support, both line and digital, and they zero rated all the sites that we gave to them.
From assisting vulnerable families in different constituencies, forging forward into 2021, more will be done.
We have to start viewing internet connection no longer as a luxury, but as a necessity. So some time ago, a parent who did not have electricity would put that whenever she is able to do so. And now, at the constituency level, we've been assisting parents to install electricity in their homes. Now, those would be vulnerable families and families with students in school. And we have done quite a large number of persons because, of course, if you're going to be putting internet, you must first have some level of access there. Now, the second thing is that we are now looking at internet service in the same way. So in this new year, we are going to be helping families where there are students in school, where they are very vulnerable and probably never had and cannot afford. We are going to assist those families.
That story just ended the national report for today, Tuesday, January 12th. Let's recap the top story. Government requests deferral of 4% salary increase for public officers for 2021. On behalf of the entire news and production team, I am Rikisha St. Louis saying thank you for joining us. Until next time.
Stay up to date with all that's happening with the new national party, NNP. Send us a message via text or WhatsApp on 405